My sister, Sophia, abandoned her 2 children at my home to chase a younger man. After 6 months of silence, I became their legal guardian. So when she returned, broke and demanding them back, I laid a trap she never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The doorbell rang at precisely 9:47 p.m. on a Friday night, an intrusion so rare it felt like a violation of natural law. In my world, things happened on a schedule. I woke at 6:00 a.m. My workday at the county archives ran from 8:00 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and my evenings were reserved for quiet reading, methodical meal prep, and the comfortable silence of a life I had meticulously curated. Unscheduled visitors, especially at this hour, were not part of the blueprint. I peered through the peephole and my stomach sank. It was my younger sister, Sophia, looking windswept and frantic. Beside her, half hidden by her legs, were my niece and nephew, Leo and Maya. Leo, ever the serious one at 8 years old, stared at the welcome mat with a somber intensity. 5-year-old Maya was clutching a worn unicorn plushie, her thumb already making its way toward her mouth. They were both in their pajamas. I unlatched the door, and the cool night air swept in, carrying the scent of my sister's cloying floral perfume and something else, the electric buzz of chaos. "Mary, thank God," she breathed, pushing past me into the foyer. She didn't so much walk as she did glide, a whirlwind of distressed denim and flowing fabric. Her hair was a curated mess of blonde waves, and her eyes were wide with a manufactured urgency I knew all too well. "You are an actual lifesaver, a literal angel sent from heaven." "Sophia, what's going on? It's almost 10 o'clock. I kept my voice level, the practiced calm of an older sister who had been diffusing Sophia's crises for 2 decades. "Okay, so you are not going to believe this, but Jax, you know my Jax, he just got this insane, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," she said, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. "A spot at the Starlight Serenade Festival. It's a huge deal for emerging artists. Like a record exec could be there. This could be it, Mare, the big break." I looked from her sparkling eyes to the tired, anxious faces of her children. Leo was now looking at me, his gaze deep and questioning. Maya had started to sway on her feet, her little body surrendering to exhaustion. "The festival?" I asked, my archivist brain already filing away the inconsistencies. "The one 3 hours away, tonight." "Yes, it's all very last minute, very rock and roll," she laughed, a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We have to leave, like, right now to get there in time for his sound check tomorrow morning. And I couldn't find another sitter on such short notice. It's just for the weekend, I promise. I'll be back Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening at the absolute latest. You know I'm good for it." The lie was so blatant, so utterly transparent that it almost took my breath away. For a fleeting second, I saw her as a stranger. Sophia was not good for it. She was a beautiful, charming black hole of responsibility. I was the stable planet she orbited, pulling from my gravity whenever she spun out of control. "Sophia," I started, the protest already dying on my lips as I looked at the kids. They had no idea they were pawns in her game of perpetual adolescence. They just looked tired and scared. Denying her meant punishing them, forcing them back into a car for a 3-hour drive to sleep in who knows, where while their mother chased a dream with a boy 7 years her junior. "Please, Mary," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't do this to me. This is important." To me, the words hung in the air. I knelt, ignoring my sister for a moment, and gave Leo a small smile. "Hey, buddy, you look tired." He just nodded, his dark eyes, so much like his father's, another man Sophia had left in her wake, fixed on my face. Maya, seeing my attention, took a hesitant step forward and held up her unicorn. "Her name is Sparkle," she mumbled around her thumb. "She's beautiful, sweetie," I said, my heart constricting. I stood up and looked at my sister. The decision was already made, not by me, but by the 2 small, pajama-clad figures standing in my meticulously ordered foyer. I would take them. I would always take them. "Okay," I said, the word tasting like resignation. Okay, Sophia, Sunday evening. Relief washed over her face, so pure and selfish it was almost childlike. Thank you, thank you, thank you, you're the best. She gave each of the kids a perfunctory kiss on the top of their heads. Be good for your Aunt Mary, okay? Mommy will be back before you know it. She dropped a duffel bag on the floor, a bag that looked far too small for a weekend, blew me a kiss from the doorway, and was gone. The roar of a cheap, modified muffler faded down the street, leaving behind a profound and unnerving silence. I closed the door and turned the lock, the click echoing in the sudden stillness. I looked at the two children, who were now staring up at me, their small faces a mixture of confusion and hope. They were waiting for an adult to make sense of the world for them. And in that moment, as I looked at their lost expressions and the flimsy duffel bag on my floor, I understood the depth of my sister's casual cruelty. It wasn't just a lie. It was the first shovelful of dirt on the grave of the relationship I thought we had. The weekend was a blur of improvisation. My quiet, two-bedroom home, usually a sanctuary of solitude and order, was transformed into a chaotic landscape of cartoons, spilled juice, and small, emotionally charged landmines. I discovered Leo was allergic to peanuts, a detail Sophia had never bothered to mention. I learned Maya was terrified of the dark and needed not one, but 3 nightlights to fend off the shadow monsters. I bought toothbrushes, children's shampoo, and an alarming quantity of chicken nuggets. I pushed aside my research on 19th century land deeds and instead learned the names of every character in Panda Patrol. By Sunday afternoon, I was exhausted, but a strange sort of contentment had settled over me. Watching Leo meticulously build a towering city of books and Maya giggling as she dressed my cat in a doll's bonnet, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with my thermostat. Then Sunday evening arrived. Then 8 p.m. Then 10 p.m. My phone remained silent. I put the kids to bed, tucking them into my guest room, which now looked like a toy store had exploded. Leo looked at me just before I turned out the light. "Is Mom coming tonight?" he asked, his voice small. "She might be running a little late, sweetie," I said, hating the lie, hating the false hope I was selling him. "Get some sleep. We'll talk to her in the morning." At 11:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "OMG, epic night. Jax killed it. We're celebrating. So tired. Traffic will be awful in the AM. Safer to just come back Tuesday. Kisses to the Munchkins. Zoe." Tuesday, not Monday, not "I'm so sorry." Just Tuesday. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I typed out a furious reply about responsibility, about school on Monday, about the promises made to children. Then I deleted it. Arguing with Sophia via text was like trying to nail jelly to a wall. It was pointless and messy. "Okay," I typed back. "Drive safe." The act of documenting was second nature to me. As an archivist, my entire career was built on preserving records, on creating a clear, chronological trail of events. It was a habit I now applied to my sister. I took a screenshot of the text, of the time it was sent, and saved it to a new folder on my computer. The folder was titled simply, Sophia. Monday was a logistical nightmare. I called in a personal day, citing a family emergency, which felt both true and woefully inadequate. I had to explain to Leo and Maya that their mom was super busy and that I would be taking them to school. This required a frantic trip to Sophia's apartment, which I had a spare key to for emergencies just like this, to retrieve their uniforms and backpacks. The apartment was a disaster. Dirty dishes, discarded clothes, and an empty bottle of cheap wine on the counter. There was no note, no sign of a planned departure. It looked like she had just walked out and never looked back. Tuesday came and went with another text, this one arriving late in the afternoon. "Car trouble, stuck here for another day or two. So frustrating. Tell the kids I love them." I screenshotted it, saved it. The folder was growing. By Friday, a full week after she had dropped them off, the excuses had become a dark, running joke. The car trouble had morphed into a full transmission replacement. The festival after-party had become a networking opportunity with a really important producer. Her texts grew shorter, the emojis more frequent, as if a dancing banana could somehow mask the glaring reality of her neglect. Just a few more days. Promise. Things are complicated. Stop worrying so much, Mare. They're fine, WU. I stopped replying with questions. I stopped asking when. I just sent back a single, hollow okay and saved the evidence. The children were the ones who bore the brunt of it. Maya started having nightmares every single night, waking up screaming for a mother who wasn't there. Leo grew quieter, retreating into his books and his drawings. One evening, I found a picture he had drawn. It was our family, me, a smiling figure on one side and him and Maya in the middle. On the far right, where his mother should have been, was just a faint, erased smudge. My quiet, ordered life was a distant memory. I was now a full-time parent, juggling school runs, parent-teacher meetings I had no authority to be in, and the bottomless emotional needs of two traumatized children. My work at the archive suffered. I was distracted, exhausted, making careless errors. My colleagues were kind, but I could see the questions in their eyes. One night, about 3 weeks in, after settling Maya down from a particularly bad nightmare, I sat in my living room, the silence pressing in on me. I opened my laptop and went to the Sophia folder. I scrolled through the screenshots, a timeline of escalating irresponsibility. Her social media had gone dark. Her phone now went straight to voicemail. She was a ghost, a phantom who had left 2 living, breathing pieces of her heart on my doorstep. I closed my eyes, the sheer weight of it all threatening to crush me. I had enabled her for years, always been the safety net, the backstop. I had cleaned up her messes, paid her bills, and offered a shoulder to cry on. And this was my reward. She had used my love for her children, as a convenient exit strategy from her own life. A bitter, cold anger began to burn through the exhaustion. It was a clean, pure flame, and in its light, I saw a path forward. She had made her choice. Now I had to make mine. As I sat there in the dark, a thought repeated in my mind, a quiet, steady drumbeat against the chaos. She had forgotten one crucial thing. She had forgotten who I was. She forgot that I remember everything. The bond between sisters, I've read, is supposed to be one of the strongest. For us, it had always been a bond of convenience, my sister's convenience. I was 6 years old when Sophia was born, and from that moment, I was designated the responsible one. While she was charming her way out of trouble, I was the one making sure our homework was done. While she was sneaking out to parties in high school, I was home, covering for her with our parents. It was a pattern that solidified into the bedrock of our relationship. I remembered, with a clarity that stung, the time she called me from college, crying because she'd spent her entire semester's book money on a spring break trip. I didn't hesitate. I emptied my meager savings account, the money I'd been carefully setting aside from my part-time library job, and transferred it to her. I ate ramen noodles for 2 months, but she got her textbooks. "You're the best, Mary," she had chirped over the phone a week later, the crisis already a distant memory for her. For me, the feeling of an empty bank account lingered. When she decided, on a whim, to become a yoga instructor, I was the one who paid for her certification course. When she got her first apartment, our parents refused to co-sign, citing her track record. So I did. My pristine credit, built through years of careful, methodical payments, was put on the line for her. For the first year, I held my breath every month until I saw the rent payment clear. Her devotion, however, was always fleeting and transactional. It was reserved for whatever or whoever was the shiniest object in her immediate vicinity. First, it was Leo and Maya's father, a steady, kind man who had adored her. She left him when Leo was 4 because, as she'd explained to me over wine, he's just so predictable. I need passion, Mare. I need a spark. She traded his stability for a string of short-lived, fiery relationships that always ended the same way, with her on my couch, crying about being misunderstood. And now there was Jax. After a month of complete silence from Sophia, my worry had curdled into a cold, methodical resolve. I hired a private investigator, a discreet, expensive man recommended by a lawyer I'd consulted. His job was simple: find my sister. Not to bring her home, but to establish a legal record of her abandonment. While he worked, I began my own investigation, using the archival skills I'd honed for 15 years. I started with Sophia's social media, the accounts she'd abandoned. They were a digital monument to her narcissism. But buried in the tagged photos from 3 months ago, I found him, Jax. He was exactly what I expected. Younger, with artfully messy hair, a jawline that could cut glass, and the vacant, self-satisfied stare of someone who had never had to work for anything. His own social media was a curated gallery of his art. Posed shots with a guitar he barely seemed to know how to hold, moody black and white photos of him staring off into the distance, and endless videos of him playing uninspired covers in dimly lit bars. The captions were a goldmine of cringe-inducing platitudes about the journey and chasing the vibe. But it was Sophia's comments that turned my stomach. Under a photo of him looking particularly brooding, she had written, "My artist, my soul. So proud of the magic you're making." It was a level of public adoration she had never once shown her own children. I dug deeper, cross-referencing names from his friends list, searching public records, and falling down a rabbit hole of online forums for aspiring musicians. The image that emerged was not of an emerging artist, but of a professional grifter. He moved from city to city, festival to festival, always managing to find a slightly older, lonely woman to latch onto. A woman who would pay for the gas, the hotel rooms, the new guitar strings. A woman who would believe his empty promises of fame and fortune. There were posts in closed groups from 2 other women, in 2 different states, warning others about him. They told stories of being charmed, of giving him money, of him disappearing the moment a better opportunity or a more willing benefactor came along. He wasn't building a career, he was a parasite looking for a host. And my sister, my beautiful, foolish sister, had served herself up on a silver platter. She hadn't just chosen this boy over her children, she had chosen a fantasy. The polished but disingenuous image of a life she thought she deserved, one free of responsibility, of school lunches and scraped knees. One afternoon, the investigator called. "We've located her," he said in his clipped, professional tone. She and the subject, Jax, are in a motel just outside of Austin, Texas. They've been there for 3 weeks. My source indicates they are low on funds. It appears his networking opportunities have not been panning out. Austin, she was in Texas, and she hadn't called. She hadn't sent a postcard, she had just vanished. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity for her. She was in a cheap motel room with a man who was clearly using her dreams of a glamorous life likely crumbling into a dusty, sun-bleached reality. But then I looked at the kitchen table, where Leo was patiently showing Maya how to sound out the words in a picture book. The pity evaporated, replaced by the hard, unyielding steel of a protector. Sophia had made her bed. I, and her children, were no longer going to lie in it with her. The private investigator's report was the final piece of the puzzle, the corroborating document that transformed my collection of screenshots and resentful memories into a cold, hard case. I sat at my dining room table, which now doubled as my command center, the report open next to my laptop. Austin, Texas. A motel called the Sunset Motor Lodge. Receipts from pawn shops where Sophia had sold her grandmother's locket and a tablet computer I had given her for her birthday. It was a bleak, sordid timeline of decline. For 4 months, I had existed in a state of suspended animation, a reactive force against the chaos Sophia had unleashed. I managed school schedules, doctor's appointments, and nightmares. I answered the children's heartbreaking questions with gentle deflections. I had become an expert in treading water. But the report was a catalyst. It was no longer enough to just survive Sophia's absence. I had to act. I had to build a lifeboat, not just for me, but for the 2 small, innocent passengers she had left stranded. My turning point came not in a moment of anger, but in a quiet moment of profound clarity. It was a Tuesday evening, and Leo had a school project due. It was a diorama of his family. He had carefully constructed a little shoebox world. There was a little clay figure of me with glasses made from a paperclip. There were figures for him and Maya holding hands, and in the corner there was a figure of Sophia, her back turned to the others. When I asked him about it, he just shrugged. "She's busy," he said, echoing the lie I had been telling him for months. Seeing that little clay figure perpetually turned away solidified my resolve. This wasn't a temporary situation. This was the new reality. These children needed more than a temporary guardian, they needed an anchor. They needed legal, undeniable, permanent stability. The next morning, I called Mr. Henderson, a family law attorney whose stoic, no-nonsense reputation was well known in the county. I had put his number on a sticky note on my monitor a month ago. Making the call felt like stepping off a cliff. His office was what you'd expect: dark wood, leather-bound books, a faint scent of old paper, and expensive cologne. Mr. Henderson himself was a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a face that suggested he had seen the absolute worst of human behavior and was no longer surprised by any of it. "Ms. Mary," he began, steepling his fingers. "Your email was concise. You believe your sister has abandoned her children." "I don't believe it," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I can prove it." I opened the leather-bound portfolio I'd brought with me. It was the archivist in me, the compulsive need to organize chaos into a coherent narrative. I had printed everything. The screenshots of the texts, organized chronologically, with timestamps highlighted. A detailed log of every missed call. A copy of the children's school attendance records, showing my name on every sign-in and sign-out sheet. Bank statements showing the money I'd spent on their clothes, food, and medical copays. And finally, the private investigator's report, complete with dated photos of Sophia and Jax entering the seedy Texas motel. I pushed the portfolio across the polished desk. He opened it and began to read. He was silent for a long time. He didn't skim. He read every word, his eyes moving methodically from page to page. He examined the photos, his expression unchanging. The only sound in the room was the rustle of paper and the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. When he finally looked up, his kind eyes had a new, steely edge to them. "Ms. Mary," he said, his voice low and serious. "This is one of the most comprehensive and well-documented cases of abandonment I have ever seen. You have done everything right." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. It was validation. For 4 months, I had been operating on pure instinct, fueled by desperation and a fierce, protective love. I had wondered in the darkest hours of the night if I was overstepping, if I was doing the right thing. To have a man of his experience look at my work and call it comprehensive was like being given a shield and a sword. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Now we move to protect the children," he said, his tone shifting from observer to strategist. "We file an emergency petition for temporary guardianship. Given the evidence you've provided, the length of absence, the lack of contact, the documented instability, and her presence out of state, I am confident a judge will grant it. This will give you the legal authority to make all decisions for them, medical, educational, everything. It makes you, in the eyes of the law, their primary caregiver. And Sophia. We will serve her notice at the last known address, this motel in Austin. The law requires us to make a good faith effort. She will have a window to contest it. If she doesn't show up, and based on this file, I suspect she won't, the temporary guardianship will likely become a permanent one after a set period." He paused, leaning forward. "Mary, I need you to understand what this means. This is not a small step. You are fundamentally changing the legal structure of your family. It is an act of war, in a sense. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of Leo's quiet sadness, of Maya's nightmares, of the turned-away clay figure in the shoebox. I thought of my sister's breezy texts and the pawn shop receipts. An act of war. Maybe it was, but some things are worth fighting for. "Yes," I said, the word coming out clear and strong. "I am." The call came 2 weeks later. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a Texas area code. My heart hammered against my ribs. After 5.5 months of near-total silence, the sound of her voice was jarring, like a song you once loved but now can't bear to hear. "Mare, is that you?" she asked, her voice thin and tinny. "Sophia," I said. My voice was calm. I was sitting at my dining room table, the guardianship petition, stamped and approved by a judge, in a neat file to my left. Mr. Henderson had prepared me for this. She will call when she needs something, he'd said. Stay calm, stick to the facts. Oh, thank God, I lost my phone, it's been a total nightmare, she started, the excuses flowing as naturally as breath. This new one barely works. Listen, I'm so sorry I haven't been in touch, things have just been insane. But I was thinking, I miss the Munchkins so much it hurts. How are they? The casual, breezy tone was infuriating. She spoke as if she'd been gone for a long weekend, not half a year. As if she hadn't missed the first day of kindergarten for her daughter and a birthday for her son. They're fine, Sophia, I said, keeping my voice even. Good, good, I knew they would be with you. You're just so good at all this stuff, she said, a hint of desperation creeping into her voice. So listen, the reason I'm calling is, things have gotten a little tight. Jax's producer, the one who was so interested, he had to go back to LA unexpectedly. We're kind of in a bind. I was wondering if you could just, float me a little something, just to get us through the next week or two, maybe 500, I'll pay you back, I swear. Mr. Henderson's voice echoed in my head. The first contact will be about money. This was my moment, the one I had been preparing for. I took a slow, deliberate breath. No, Sophia, I can't do that. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I had never, in our entire lives, said a flat no to her when it came to money. What do you mean no? She stammered. Mary, I'm not kidding, we're really in trouble here. I know you are, I said calmly. I know you're staying at the Sunset Motor Lodge just outside of Austin. I know you've been there for almost 2 months. I know you sold Grandma's locket on the 18th of last month for $75. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't stunned. It was cold, heavy, and full of dawning horror. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, the carefree facade crumbling to dust. How do you know that? She whispered. I hired someone to find you, Sophia, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. When you disappeared for a month, I had to make sure you were alive. And when I found out you were alive and well and simply choosing not to contact your children, I had to take steps to protect them. Protect them? From what? From me. Her voice was rising, a familiar note of indignant hysteria creeping in. They're my children. You can't spy on me. That's insane, Mary. You're insane. Is it insane to want to know where the mother of the children in your care has gone? Is it insane to pay for their food and their clothes and their therapy sessions to deal with the trauma of their mother vanishing without a word? I let the questions hang in the air. Therapy? You put my kids in therapy. She shrieked. What did you tell them? You're turning them against me. I told them the truth, Sophia, that their mother loves them very much, but she had to go away for a while. The therapist is helping them understand that it's not their fault, because they think it is. Every single day, they wonder what they did to make you leave. I heard a man's voice in the background, muffled but distinct. Who is that? What's going on? Jax. The parasite? It's nothing. She snapped, her voice away from the phone, then back to me, her tone shifting to one of poorly executed threats. You listen to me, you have no right. Those are my kids and I'm their mother. You can't keep them from me. I'll come up there and get them right now. Really? I asked, my voice still unnervingly calm. How? According to the report, Jax's car has 2 flat tires and an expired registration, and you have approximately $43 to your name. So please tell me how you plan on getting from Austin, Texas, to my front door. The sound on the other end was a choked sob of pure rage and impotence. She had been so accustomed to being in control, to manipulating situations to her advantage, that the sudden loss of power left her flailing. You witch, she hissed. I hate you, I hate you. You should know, Sophia, I continued, as if she hadn't spoken. I've been granted temporary legal guardianship. The papers were served to your motel room this morning. You have 30 days to appear in court and contest it. If you don't, the guardianship becomes permanent. The line went dead. She had hung up. I sat in the silence, my hand still gripping the phone. My heart was pounding and a cold sweat slicked my skin. There was no triumph in it, no satisfaction. It just felt bleak. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. I had exposed her lies, but in doing so, I had shattered the last, fragile illusion of the sister I thought I had. The 30-day window Sophia had to contest the guardianship began to close. For 2 weeks, there was nothing but a roaring silence from Texas. I half expected her to just give up, to let the deadline pass and fade into her transient life with Jax. But I had underestimated the pull of her own possessiveness. She didn't want to be a mother, but she couldn't stand the idea of someone else being a mother to her children. The private investigator, Mr. Jones, continued his work, now digging into Jax's background. The report he sent was more damning than I could have imagined. Jax wasn't just a charming freeloader, he was a predator with a clear pattern. Mr. Jones had found and spoken to 2 other women. One was a divorced mother of one in Arizona, a woman who had drained her savings to fund his debut album before he vanished. The other was a recent widow in Florida who had co-signed on a car loan for him, a car he promptly drove across the country and never made a single payment on. He had a petty criminal record, too, a string of minor offenses for shoplifting and public disturbance. He wasn't a musician chasing a dream, he was a con artist. I saved the report to the folder. More evidence. More proof that my decision had been the right one. The children were beginning to thrive in the stability I provided. Maya's nightmares were less frequent, and she had stopped sucking her thumb. Leo was smiling more. He had made a friend at school, and they were inseparable. I had enrolled him in a weekend art class, and his talent was blossoming. He was drawing pictures of superheroes and dragons now, not sad, smudged-out mothers. We had a routine. We had family movie nights. We were becoming a family. Then the video call came. It was an unknown email address, a request for a video chat. My hands trembled as I clicked accept. Sophia's face appeared on my screen, grainy and poorly lit. She looked awful. Her hair was limp, her skin was sallow, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. She was in a different room, not the motel. It looked like a spare bedroom in a cheap apartment. "Mary," she said. Her voice was flat. "Sophia." I could see Jax moving in the background, a shadow passing behind her. He leaned into the frame, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. He was handsome, I could give him that, but there was a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He looked directly at the camera, at me, with an expression of smug ownership. "So this is the sister," he said, his voice a lazy drawl. "The one trying to steal your kids." "Jax, don't," Sophia said weakly. "No, let's talk about this," he said, pulling up a chair and sitting beside her, draping a possessive arm around her shoulders. "You think you can just file some papers and take a woman's children. That's not how it works, lady. Sophia's coming home and she's getting her kids back." "Is that what's happening, Sophia?" I asked, ignoring him and speaking directly to my sister. "Are you coming home?" "Yes," she said, her eyes flicking nervously towards Jax. "We're coming home. We found a ride. We'll be there in a few days. And you are going to drop this ridiculous guardianship thing, and you're going to give me my children." The "we" was not lost on me. He was coming with her. He was planning on moving into the life I had so painstakingly built to reap the benefits of the stability I had provided. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "Sophia," I said, keeping my voice level, "we need to talk about Jax." "What about him?" She snapped defensively. "He loves me. He's been here for me when you were trying to stab me in the back." "Did he tell you about Amanda in Phoenix?" I asked. Sophia's face went blank. "What, who?" "Amanda, the art teacher, the one whose life savings he spent on studio time and then disappeared." I didn't wait for an answer. "Or what about Carol in Sarasota? The widow, the one whose credit he ruined when he defaulted on the car loan she co-signed for. The car you're probably driving right now, by the way, does it have Florida plates?" I saw it in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, a flash of doubt. She knew, somewhere deep down she knew. Jax's smirk faltered. His hand tightened on her shoulder. "She's lying," he said, his voice tight. "She's just trying to turn you against me." "Am I asked. I held up a printed sheet of paper to the camera. It was a mugshot of Jax from a public disturbance charge in Louisiana 2 years prior. "Does this look like a lie, Sophia?" His name isn't even Jax, it's Jason Miller. He has a record. He does this for a living. He finds women like you, lonely and a little lost, and he drains them of everything they have before moving on to the next one. Sophia stared at the image on the screen, her face ashen. She looked from the mugshot to the man sitting beside her, and for the first time I think she saw him for what he was. Not a romantic artist, but a cheap, common criminal. "She's crazy, soft, Jax," Jason said, his voice losing its smooth charm and taking on a hard, ugly edge. "Don't listen to her." But she was listening. The spell was breaking. I could see the dawning, horrific realization on her face. Her fairy tale was a sham. Her prince was a frog. Her grand romantic adventure was just a long, pathetic con. "I have to go," she whispered, her eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with me. She didn't disconnect the call. She just stood up and walked out of the frame, leaving me looking at the smirking, exposed face of Jason Miller. He stared at me for a long moment, the mask completely gone, his eyes full of pure, undiluted malice. Then he reached forward and the screen went black. 4 days after the video call, my doorbell rang. It wasn't the tentative, nervous ring of a delivery person, nor the cheerful chime of a neighbor. It was a frantic, insistent series of presses, a sound of pure desperation. I knew, with absolute certainty, who was on the other side. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, and walked to the door. When I opened it, the sight of my sister was a physical shock. The woman on my doorstep was a ghost of the vibrant, self-assured person who had left 6 months ago. She was skeletal, her trendy clothes hanging off her frame. Her expensive blonde hair was greasy and matted, her face pale and tear-streaked. She was alone. The swagger was gone, the charm extinguished. All that was left was a raw, gaping wound of a human being. "Mary," she croaked, her voice raw from crying. "Let me in." I stepped aside without a word. She stumbled into the foyer, her eyes darting around the house as if seeing it for the first time. She took in the sight of Leo's paintings taped to the wall, Maya's brightly colored rain boots by the door, the neat stack of library books on the hall table. This was a home now, not just a house. It was a life that was continuing, thriving without her. "Where are they?" she demanded, her voice a fragile whisper. "At school," I said. "It's a Tuesday, Sophia. They go to school on Tuesdays." The simple, factual statement seemed to infuriate her. "Don't you talk to me like that," she snapped, a flicker of the old fire returning. "Don't you dare patronize me. I drove for 2 days straight. I haven't slept. I came here for my children." "You came here because you have nowhere else to go," I corrected her, my voice quiet but firm. "He left you, didn't he? Or did you finally find the sense to leave him?" "It doesn't matter," she cried, her hands flying to her head. "He's gone, it's over. I made a mistake, okay? A huge, terrible mistake, I admit it. Now I'm here to fix it. I'm taking my kids home." She said the word home as if it were a place that still existed for her, a place she could just step back into. She seemed to have forgotten she had been evicted from her apartment 3 months ago for non-payment of rent. I had been the one to pack her belongings into a storage unit. "There is no home for you to take them to, Sophia," I said patiently. "And they are home, right here." "This is not their home," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You are not their mother, I am." She took a step toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms, as if she intended to start packing their things. I moved to block her path. I wasn't bigger or stronger than her, but in that moment I was an immovable object. "No," I said. The word was cold and final. "You are not taking them anywhere." "You can't stop me," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face now. "You think your little court papers mean anything. I'll tell the judge you're a crazy, jealous spinster who stole my babies. I'll tell them you lied and manipulated everything." "And what will you tell them, Sophia?" I asked, my voice still level. I refused to be drawn into her storm. "Will you tell them you didn't contact your children for 172 days? Will you show them your bank records, filled with charges from bars and motels across 3 states? Will you explain to them why you pawned the locket our grandmother gave you? Will you introduce them to Jason Miller and his criminal record? Because I have all of that information. It's in a folder. It's very well organized." I'll be happy to provide the court with a copy. Every fact was a stone, and I watched them land one by one, breaking her down. The rage began to dissolve, replaced by a racking, desperate grief. She slid down the wall, collapsing into a heap on my hardwood floor, her body shaking with sobs. "Please, Mary," she begged, looking up at me, all the fight gone from her. "Please, I have nothing. He took everything. He took the last of my money. He left me at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I have nothing left. They are all I have. Don't take them away from me, please." My heart ached. This was my sister, the little girl I had taught to ride a bike, the teenager whose secrets I had kept. A part of me wanted to rush to her, to hold her, to tell her it would all be okay, just like I always had. But then I looked past her, at the wall of paintings, at the life these children now had. My duty was to them, not to the woman who had so carelessly broken their hearts. "I'm not taking them away from you, Sophia," I said, my voice softening slightly. "You gave them away. I am just the one who was here to catch them." It was then that we heard a noise from the top of the stairs. We both looked up. It was Leo. I had forgotten it was a half-day for parent-teacher conferences. My neighbor must have dropped him off. He stood on the landing in his school uniform, his backpack hanging off one shoulder, his face pale. He was staring at the crumpled figure of his mother on the floor. "Mom," he said, his voice small and uncertain. Sophia's head snapped up. "Leo, baby." She cried, scrambling to her feet and rushing toward the stairs, her arms outstretched. But Leo didn't run to her. He didn't smile. He took a step back, his small hand gripping the banister. He looked at this strange, disheveled woman with fear and confusion in his eyes. He looked from her to me, his safe person, his anchor. In that moment, he wasn't looking at his mother. He was looking at a stranger who was making his Aunt Mary upset. That single, reflexive step back did what all my evidence, all my lawyers, and all my angry words could not. It told the entire truth of the last 6 months in one devastating, silent gesture. Sophia stopped dead at the bottom of the stairs, her arms frozen in the air. The hope in her eyes died, replaced by a look of such profound and complete devastation that I had to look away. She had expected to be welcomed with open arms, to be the prodigal mother returned. But the son she had left behind no longer knew her. She lowered her arms, her shoulders slumping in utter defeat. The fight was over. The last delusion had been stripped away. She couldn't demand them, she couldn't manipulate her way back, because they weren't just possessions to be reclaimed. They were people she had hurt, and the damage was right there in front of her, in her own son's terrified eyes. "I see," she whispered to no one in particular. She didn't look at me. She couldn't look at Leo. She just stared at the empty space between them, a chasm of her own making. In the end, Sophia didn't contest the guardianship. Her brief, disastrous appearance at my house was the final, shattering blow to her own denial. After Leo had retreated back upstairs with me, I made Sophia a cup of tea and sat her down at my kitchen table. There were no more threats, no more tears. There was just a vast, hollow emptiness. It was in that quiet, defeated space that I laid out the path forward. It wasn't a punishment, it was a blueprint for redemption. "First," I said, pushing a piece of paper across the table, "you're going to call this number. It's a women's shelter. They have a bed for you. They'll help you find a job and get back on your feet." She stared at the number without moving. "Second," I continued, my voice gentle but firm, "you will start therapy. Not just for a week, but for real. You have to address why you did this. You have to understand the damage you've caused before you can even begin to fix it." "And the kids?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "When your therapist and their therapist agree that you are in a stable place, you can begin with supervised visits. 1 hour once a week at a neutral location. Not here. How those visits go will determine what happens next. If you are stable, if you prove you can be a safe and reliable presence in their lives, we can discuss expanding them. If you miss a visit, if you cause them any distress, we go back to zero. The children's well-being is the only thing that matters. This is the only path, Sophia. There is no other." She nodded slowly, the fight completely gone. She took the paper, folded it, and put it in her pocket. An hour later, a volunteer from the shelter came to pick her up. She didn't ask to see the children before she left. She knew she had no right. As for Jason Miller, his downfall was swift and satisfying. I forwarded my investigator's entire file, the testimonies from the women in Arizona and Florida, his real name, his criminal record, to the authorities in all 3 states. The woman in Florida, emboldened by the evidence, pressed charges for the fraudulent car loan. He was picked up a month later on a warrant and faced a litany of charges that would keep him tied up in the legal system for years. He was no longer my problem. The months that followed were a period of slow, careful reconstruction. Sophia did what I told her. She went to the shelter, she got a job bussing tables at a diner, and she started therapy. The first supervised visit, 2 months later, was excruciatingly awkward. It was at a sterile community center room. Maya hid behind my legs for the first 20 minutes while Leo answered his mother's questions in monosyllables. Sophia, for her part, followed the rules. She was quiet, sober, and she didn't make any promises she couldn't keep. Slowly, glacially, things began to thaw. The visits increased to 2 hours. They moved to a local park. One Saturday, 6 months after her return, I watched from a distance as Sophia pushed Maya on a swing. I heard Maya's peal of laughter, a sound I had worried Sophia might never hear again. Leo was showing her a drawing he had made, and she was listening, really listening, with a focused attention I had never seen from her before. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Our sisterly relationship was not magically healed. It was forever changed, fractured and reset into something new and more honest. The old dynamic of reckless daughter and responsible caretaker was gone, replaced by a cautious respect built on the hard foundation of boundaries. She was working to earn back her children's trust, one scraped knee, one shared joke, one kept promise at a time. The power was no longer hers to abuse. It was mine, to be used only for the protection and well-being of the 2 incredible children who had remade my life. That evening, after a quiet dinner, I tucked Maya into bed. She hugged her unicorns, Sparkle, and looked up at me. "Aunt Mary," she said, "I'm glad we live here." Later, I sat with Leo in the living room, reading side by side in comfortable silence. He looked up from his book. "Mommy seemed happy today," he said. It wasn't a question, it was an observation. "Yes, sweetie," I said, my heart full. I think she was. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me, a quiet that had nothing to do with the absence of noise. It was the calm that comes after a long and terrible storm. My meticulously ordered life was gone, and I didn't miss it. In its place was something messier, louder, and infinitely more meaningful. I had not set out to build this life, but I had fought for it. And for the first time, everything felt exactly as it should be.